So, we are going to talk a little bit about today about Apologia. I'm kind of doing this in reverse because normally I would talk about stakeholders and issue phases for how to respond to a crisis, but I'm not doing that today. I'm going to switch it up a little bit and go in reverse. Talk about Apologia today, get into issue stages tomorrow, and talk a little bit about what Apologia is and how it relates to your assignment. So I'll go over Apologia first, and then I will go into what your assignment entails for next week, Monday, because those are going to be speeches. So, like I said, I will give a presentation on Thursday, a video on that. But the Apologia speeches will be on Monday. So plan to turn those in, and I'll probably not have a presentation on that Monday, as that'll count for everything else. So, all right, let's get into it. So first and foremost, we talked a little bit about what apologia is, and that is a speech of defense. It's motivated by accusatory discourse, as you see right here. And that kind of means anything along the lines of anybody that's accusing you of wrongdoing. So if you or your business are in trouble for some reason, that somebody's accusing you of doing something that is considered wrong in the eyes of the public or your stakeholders, whatnot, you will have this opportunity and necessity to be able to speak up and say, "Hey, this is us in our defense." Whatever that defense may be, it may be that, as you see, it may contain an apology, but it may not contain an apology. It may say, look, I don't think what you're saying is accurate. I don't think what you're saying is true, and here's why. So, these are all variables in terms of what we're doing in terms of speeches of defense. And when we get into apologia, this is categorized by William Benoit in 1995. And I love these. I love talking about these because they're super interesting. So you see denial, evasion of responsibility, offensiveness, corrective action, and mortification. So I'm going to go over all five of those and talk a little bit about how they can be implemented. So denial is what it is. It is basically saying, I did not do whatever you think I did. Um, and in this case, I mentioned the Taco Bell ad last week, and that is a good example of denial, where somebody said, hey, you are not using FDA approved ground beef in your tacos, therefore you cannot call them you can't call them beef. You have to call them something else. And Taco Bell's like, no, that's not true at all. And here's our FDA approval. This is absolutely what we're doing correctly. And they actually went right back at the person, the district attorney in Alabama. That'll be talked about here in a second. But that's kind of denial, is saying that, no, you're wrong, this did not occur. And I will mention to everybody, this is not a bad strategy to take if need be. So I've had a lot of students do this, where they will say, they'll go through their project and say, for their case study, that they actually actively look for somebody that they said, this organization is innocent. They did not do what the people said that they were going to, that they were being accused of, and so they took that approach and ended up very well. You got to be careful with that though, because a lot of it is your discourse sometimes doesn't matter in the eyes of the public, because sometimes they'll rip on you one way or the other, regardless if you are sincere or truthful or not. The damage is already done in this case. So that's denial. There is also evasion of responsibility. I see less of this, but it is still something that is really good to talk about. Evasion of responsibility kind of gets into the, we didn't do this, and this is why, and this is who did. So it is pushing blame onto somebody else. I usually like to look at this in terms of segmenting different things, um, where evasion of responsibility can look into someone in particular that did this. Domino's is that good example. I know I've mentioned this before, where they took full responsibility. That was really good. They took a corrective action and mortification route, but they also said, look, this was one employee. They did something really stupid. They are fired. I mean, and that store is condemned at that time. So again, a lot of it comes into this uh, issue of saying like, yeah, we are sorry for what has happened, but at the same time, what occurred was an isolated incident, and those people have been dealt with. That they are no longer working for us. So that evasion can be segmented to where you're taking partial responsibility, but you're also moving it to someone else in that case. Reducive offensiveness is basically saying you are making a mountain out of a molehill. I don't know if this is probably one of the best ways to do this, per any crisis literature or message strategy that I've heard. But it is basically saying, hey, stop making a big deal out of something that is not worth that time. There are so many bigger issues out there, and you're focusing on this. Um, that does get a little bit in terms of neglect towards a person or a public or a stakeholder that might be really upset with something, which I think is warranted of a response. Um, but it is something that comes up and people use. And it's not to say that it's a bad thing. I have had students use this in the past where it actually worked pretty well. But for the most part, I typically avoid doing this. When you are found of doing something incorrectly by your stakeholders, the public, this is where corrective action and mortification come in. Mortification is an apology. This is where you take the apologia and actually use it to say, "I am sorry. We were not aware of what we did, or we are well aware of what we did, and this is our bad. We are very, very apologetic." This was that Wormwood case of Douglas taking it in and saying like, "Look, this is my fault," and he's like, "I just felt like I did a terrible disservice to everybody that was involved." To where mortification comes in. With mortification usually comes corrective action, and it should. So one thing I'm going to suggest to everybody, if whatever case study you take on, what I would recommend for everybody is to take the corrective action approach when you talk about mortification. So, if you are apologizing for something, you really should go that further step and say, what is it specifically that you plan to do to make a corrective move on this case? So, if you apologize, and a lot of people will, this is probably the most common one that I've seen. How do you plan to fix it specifically? And I'm going to be a big stickler about this. I don't want anything vague. Keep it very specific in this capacity. Okay. Last thing I'll go over, and this is really important, is this area of categoria. So apologia is one thing. That is the speech of defense. Now we're going into speech of attack. And this is like an extension of denial. So you're saying, not only did I not do it, I'm going to go after the people that said I did it. You got to be really careful with this. And this is important in the case of, a lot of organizations might apologize for something, but then they also might say, hey, this is not, we're not the only ones to blame here. And this is another person that needs to be talked to. In a lot of cases, this isn't a strong tactic. But one thing that I will mention is, again, if you are being accused of something, and you want to talk to another person about it, especially to your accuser, this is a valid strategy that people have used in the past to protect their brand. I mean, this is very important. Um, Ethics, in a lot of cases, are very in the middle ground here, as we kind of discuss why we would attack another organization to preserve our own. But there's two ways to do it. There's one against policy and one against character. You could do it in the way of policy of saying, I mean, I say this a lot in terms of student reviews for my class. Some people do it based on policy to where they're like, I don't like the way the syllabus was structured. I don't like the way he did his assignments. I don't like the way he delivered his presentations. I am talking a lot of negative stuff about myself right now. But then there's also attack against character. So it's basically saying that this person is ill form in terms of how they present their information, and that's really tough thing to do. So this would be less of saying I don't like a certain thing that Dr. Daniel is doing within his syllabus. I don't like something that he does personally, and that's where that attack comes in. Again, you got to be very careful with that. And I usually say if you're going the category route, stick to policy in this case, because a lot of what you'll be attacking against is something within their statement of something that can be corrected versus character. I see a lot of athletes do this in terms of category within character. And so a lot of these will be saying that you will introduce a new set of problems, which may defect away from what's going on with you. You may reduce a person's credibility who's attacking you, or you may demean it, to say that they are not an accurate source to be attacking you. Who are they to be doing this?